Wildlife.
Hello, welcome to The Wild Review on The Wild Reviewer, and welcome back to another installment of...
Damn it.
And welcome back to another installment of Lost and Found. This is a segment where I touch upon pieces of media that have been lost throughout the years. It's mostly just me talking about a bunch of shows that aren't exactly memorable, either because they were just dull, didn't stand out very well, or were just terrible. Last week I touched upon the failed Jimmy Neutron spin-off Planet Sheen, which focused on one of Jimmy's best friends, Sheen Estevez, blasting himself into space and crash landing on the planet Xenu. And unlike Jimmy Neutron, where it had a bunch of action sequences and all these villains that were recurring to try to destroy Jimmy, and Planet Sheen had monster quesadillas and houses that were in the shape of Sheen's head and characters that look like this. Today we're going to talk about a Disney show. Now I wouldn't say this show was a complete failure because some people do remember it, but this show has kind of gotten lost within the pit of many other Disney shows that aren't memorable. In fact, if you had to stack all the Disney shows that were ever made, you'd obviously put the really popular ones on top, like, That's So Raven or Zack and Cody, and I would say this show would be maybe near the bottom, somewhere lost in between that tower of an invisible lineup of shows that you can see right in front of me. This is House of Mouse. Again, this show wasn't awful, and there is a good chance that some of you may even remember it, but you don't really hear many people talking about it when they bring up classic Disney shows, especially when it comes to the animated side of Disney. You have shows like Kim Possible and Lilo and Stitch, but then you have House of Mouse, which should actually be the one show that everyone should have been obsessed with. And the reason for that is very simple. The one thing I know everybody loves when it comes to television is crossovers, which I guess shouldn't be surprising, seeing that Infinity War did very well at the box office this year. I understand Infinity War is not a television show, it's a movie, but you get the point. It was a huge crossover movie between all Marvel characters. What I think Disney fans don't realize if they never watched this show is that House of Mouse was kind of the only chance they ever got to see every Disney character in one room in one television show. And I'm not bluffing, this picture is not a photoshopped picture at all. Of course, not all the characters had speaking roles, it would just be in the background. But for somebody who really likes crossovers, me, this show was pretty cool. House of Mouse aired on Toon Disney, which was the sister channel to the Disney Channel at the time before Disney XD was a thing. It ran for a good 3 seasons and 52 episodes from 2001 all the way to 2003. The show focused around Mickey Mouse and all of his friends running a dinner theater club called the House of Mouse, which was located downtown in Toontown. Every night, many Disney characters from a variety of different Disney films would all gather together at this dinner club, and they would enjoy themselves by listening to Mickey do stand-up and be entertained by special appearances by Disney characters that were performing, but majority of the time it was always to watch a classic Disney cartoon. For the people that actually watched House of Mouse, many of them may not realize that this is actually a spin-off from another show that actually aired Mickey Mouse cartoons called Mickey Mouse Works. One of the main premise of the show is that it shows different cartoons starring different Disney characters. So one of them could be a Mickey Mouse cartoon, another one could be a Goofy cartoon. In fact, majority of all these cartoons that are shown in House of Mouse actually came from Mickey Mouse Works. So they didn't even need to come up with any sort of new cartoons for this show. They figured they could just create a new show and show all these clips from another show that they had. But House of Mouse wasn't just a place where many cartoons from Mickey Mouse Works were shown. Majority of every episode actually had its own individual plot, which was a bit odd to me. The amount of cartoons that are actually shown in the episode span from either 2 to maybe even 5 cartoons. I forget what I said. The cartoons span from either 2, but the most amount they'll show are 3. So they show 3 cartoons per episode sometimes. When they weren't showing cartoons, the show would actually focus on Mickey and his friends dealing with a problem or something going on within the dinner club that they would kind of have to fix. It would either revolve around them, or it would revolve around one of the Disney characters that's at the dinner theater, which actually has happened before. In fact, there's a whole episode about Timon and Pumbaa. Pumbaa? Puma. What is it? Timon and Pumbaa?
Timon and
mean, the episode plots are alright, I guess. There's one episode that takes place on Valentine's Day, and that focuses around Goofy not having anybody to spend Valentine's Day with, so they try to set him up on a blind date. Meanwhile, Goofy's one of the waiters at the dinner theater, which is one of the things that would actually probably strike you a bit odd when you find out that these episodes actually have plots and aren't just showing a bunch of old Disney cartoons. I should probably stop saying old. I mean, they're only cartoons that were made like a year before. Mickey Mouse Works wasn't... It wasn't that... We're not talking about like the 90s or something. We're talking about like maybe 99 into 2000. I should really stop saying old. That's the main point. Just, I'm not going to say old anymore. I'm sorry. The one thing you have to keep in mind with this show is that every episode is taking place during the dinner theater. So they can literally be an episode where something's going wrong backstage and all the main characters have to fix it. But at the same time, they have to run this show because they have an audience. All these Disney characters are sitting in their seats waiting for something to happen. I don't know, I think maybe the episodes would have worked a little more better if maybe every episode either focused before the show started or maybe after the show, like maybe something's going on there. You can have a few episodes take place while the show is going on, because that could probably add a bit of humor, but seeing that every episode focuses on that, it's a bit odd. The episode with Timon and Pumbaa, I don't know. That episode focuses on them doing a performance at the show, but they have a disagreement on what their act's going to be, and so they end their friendship. That's a perfect plot you can do as you're doing the show. But then you got an episode like Jiminy Cricket, which focuses on Jiminy Cricket, who's the cricket in Pinocchio, quitting his job as Pinocchio's conscience. Okay? There's an episode where Mortimer Mouse is mistaken to be a critic, and so they have to please him during the show. That's another perfect example on how you can do an episode that focuses on a situation while you're putting on a show. And then you got an episode like Super Goof, which focuses on Goofy becoming a superhero while the show's going on. I get maybe the show is trying to make that statement. It's like, well, a lot of crazy things happen at the House of Mouse. It's never a dull night. You're right, it's never a dull night because you got a lot of things going on. Now, while it may sound like I'm criticizing the show and how certain episodes are run, I don't want you to get that impression that I don't like the show. I actually was very fond of this show. In fact, I was very happy to discover it one day just going through the guide because I was amazed that this show was actually its own show. I say that because one day I was being a little nosy at my friend's house and I went through their DVD collection and I discovered this one Disney video called House of Villains, which is actually the Halloween movie special based off of House of Mouse. The special focuses on all the Disney villains taking over the House of Mouse, and Mickey and his friends have to stand up and get the house back and put the villains in their place. I thought it was like maybe just one Disney special that Disney just made to try to cash in a few bucks. But then, going through the guide one day at my grandma's house, I discovered House of Mouse was its own 30-minute cartoon show. And every day that summer that I discovered it, at 1 o'clock, I would always sit my butt down on the couch and I'd watch House of Mouse. That was my 1 o'clock show every day on that glorious summer. I think it was 2007, I don't really know. I don't remember. What was that? That was 4th grade. That was like 2009, I guess? Maybe 2008? There was also another House of Mouse 1-hour special movie that also my friends had on DVD and were very generous enough to let me borrow it for the holidays. This one was the House of Mouse Christmas special, Snowed In at the House of Mouse. At least I think that's what it was called, right? Snowed In at the House of Mouse. That was actually a very unique one, as in the beginning it focused on Mickey ending the show, and as everybody was leaving, they discovered they're snowed in because a humongous snowstorm happened during the show. So, for the remainder of the night, seeing that no one can go anywhere, he decides to hold a free-of-charge Christmas dinner and allows everybody to settle in the House of Mouse until the storm clears up and everyone's able to go home for the holidays. That one was also pretty cool because for the cartoon segments of the episode, it showed a bunch of Disney Christmas cartoons, which I'm going to assume were from Mickey Mouse Works. I don't really know much about Mickey Mouse Works, but I know all the cartoons shown in House of Mouse are from that show, so we're just gonna We're just gonna take it and accept it. So with all that said about House of Mouse, the only question that remains is, what happened to it? Obviously it had a good run, it ran for 3 seasons. That obviously meant something was being done right about the show. But how come you don't hear many people talk about it, and why did it get lost in that humongous pile of other Disney shows that nobody remembers? Well, it's probably because even though it was a show that had a bunch of different Disney characters involved, not many of them did get to interact with the main story. Not only that, but the show itself is actually very forgettable. It's very hard for me to remember a single episode without actually going back to it. This is the only show I guess I could say I don't have very fond memories of watching. I do know I watched the show, I remember the theme song, but I really don't remember much about certain episodes. I only remembered what I recently just watched before I made this video. I didn't feel any nostalgic feelings either when I watched the show, which was weird because I knew I watched the show and there should have been some nostalgic feel to it or some memories that popped up, but I didn't feel any of that. It definitely wasn't a bad show, but at the same time I knew it wasn't a hit. And I guess by the end of season 3, Disney kind of got that feeling too, seeing that it wasn't exactly as popular as maybe they were expecting it to be. With a show that focuses on Mickey Mouse and all of his friends putting together a dinner theater, inviting every major Disney character that's appeared in all the big-time Disney films prior to Lilo and Stitch, you'd think it'd be some sort of hit, as it has everything that you would expect a Disney crossover would be. But I guess it didn't turn out that way. It definitely is a really good show, and I would recommend that you check it out on your own time when you have free time. Yeah, I'm telling you what to do. It is a pretty good and well put together show, and the cartoons aren't even that bad. That's one thing I didn't even mention, the cartoon aspect of the show. The cartoons are very entertainable, and although sometimes they don't have much to do with the show itself, some of the cartoons that are shown within the episodes of the show actually tie in with the main theme of the episode sometimes, so that can be very entertaining. Unfortunately, it's very hard to track down this show. If you go on iTunes, you're most likely not going to find any episodes of the show, but you are going to find the Christmas movie, which is pretty interesting. You could probably find some episodes on YouTube like I had to do. It's actually very hard to find this show, seeing that Disney doesn't play it anymore because it's so old of a show. But if you do come across a copy, I would highly recommend you chill out and check it out. And that was House of Mouse. Hopefully you enjoyed that little walk down memory lane if you watched House of Mouse like I did. Maybe you didn't. But that's where I leave the questions to, because now I wanna ask you folks some questions. Have you ever seen or heard of House of Mouse? Have you never seen House of Mouse at all? If not, what's wrong with you? Do you plan on checking out House of Mouse now after you checked out this video? Do you agree or disagree with anything that I said in this video? Let me know all your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching The Wild Review, Lost and Found. I'm The Wild Reviewer, and you just saw me review a thing. Wow, that was a pretty cool episode. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you enjoyed what you see, make sure to give the video a like. And make sure you come back next week, because we're literally just getting started with Lost and Found. Next week I'm touching upon a show I've actually talked about before in the past, but I'm going to touch upon it a little more just because it's a very interesting show and plot. So please come back. Oh jeez, I said please. Alright.
Wild like.